Well, good morning, YouTube. Well, today I'm at Shiloh National Military Park, scene of a major battle in early on in the Civil War, and it's a 18-mile driving tour. So I'm going to take a drive around and see what I can find. So some of the veterans that were of this battle that became what we all know about. Ulysses Grant, of course, was the commander for the North, became president. Garfield was also here. He became president. Major General Lew Wallace was commander in Grant's 3rd Division. He ended up writing Ben-Hur. Henry Stanley served as a Confederate infantryman, and he, of course, is the guy who went and found Dr. Livingston. John Wesley Powell lost an arm in the battles, and he was a great explorer of the American West. All through the battlefield there are plaques like these, and they will tell you what unit was there. And if you're reading the plaque, you're facing the same way they were. So in early April 1862, Grant had become a hero in the Union because he had been able to take Fort Donelson to the north of here in northwestern Tennessee. Unconditional surrender of the Confederates, so he basically took a whole army out of their forces, and he was coming down here to Corinth, where 2 major Confederate railroads crossed, one east-west, one north-south. They were main components for moving the Confederacy's supplies and communications. And as he was trying to take the whole Mississippi Valley to cut the Confederacy in. So 8 hours into the battle on that first day, the Union forces were being beaten back repeatedly, and a few thousand of the Union forces ended up in this thicket. It probably looked a lot like it does today, but as the Union was being pushed back even more, as their lines broke around it, this area was actually been able to be encircled, and the Confederates brought up artillery and bombarded in here with the infantry firing in, and eventually caused the Union forces to surrender. One of the Confederates mentioned that the sound of the mini balls from the Union forces going through the woods sounded like angry hornets. So this became known as the Hornet's Nest. And actually the surrender, where that little blue marker is back there, that's where General Prentiss surrendered the Union forces. About 2,500, I believe, were taken out. Over here is where the Hornet's Nest is, and this is the line of cannon that the Confederates set up to bombard it. The 50 cannon stretching over half a mile, and they were able to keep the Union pinned down to the point where they could get surrounded, and eventually they surrendered. But to get an idea, keeps on going. So in the late afternoon of the first day of the battle, General Johnson, who was commanding of the Confederate forces and was well regarded as one of the best generals in the Confederate Army, and he was here directing the Confederate forces as they were pushing the Union back, and he collapsed. His aide looked him over and couldn't find any visible wounds, but he bled out within 20 minutes. Turned out that a bullet had pierced the artery in his leg, and they didn't see it. I was talking to a local guy who's really knows a lot of the history of this, and he said that Johnson had a tourniquet in his pocket when he was hit, but it was never used. So, but he died back down here in this ravine late in the afternoon on April 6th, 1862. So where I'm standing now, stretching this way and that way, are the this is the line, the last line of defense on the end of the first day. This is where the Union had retreated to. They're on the high ground, and we're able to defend this. This is actually the only line that held on the first day for the Union, and then they were reinforced overnight. The Battle of Shiloh got its name from a log church, much like this reconstructed one here. Methodist church, it's called Shiloh, which stands for, it's a biblical term for peace, or place of peace, ironically. This occupied the high ground. The Union wanted to hold the high ground here, and the Confederates were just as determined to get them off. But so a lot of the fiercest part of the battle went around little log church such as this, and that Shiloh Methodist Church is actually still here in a newer building. So in case you ever happen to be here on a Sunday. As this area was being fought over on the second day, there was an observation that there were ammunition carts and artillery overturned, and dead horses and mules all over the place, and men. There were plenty of men. All of them were dead. This place, because this had been fought over the day before, they were fighting back over the same ground past their own dead. So within the national battlefield, there is a Indian mounds, which is a concentration of ancient Indian village, and I will cover that in my next video. During the Battle of Shiloh, more Americans were killed, wounded, or went missing than in all of the previous wars combined. And part of that is over here. This is a national military cemetery. About 8,000 Union troops were buried there. Not all of them died here. They buried, a lot of the Confederates were buried in mass graves and a couple other spots around. So, well, behind me and down the hill here, this is Pittsburgh Landing. This is where the steamboats could come down from the north, and whether high or low water, they could make it to this point. It's the southernmost point. This is where Grant, his troops came ashore. This is where Buell was ferried across. So during the first day of the battle, the Confederates were really trying to push their way up this way to take this away from access for Grant. They were not able to, partially because some gunboats were down here firing, anchored off of a ravine, were firing up the ravine. That sort of helped stop the Confederates. But anyway, this is where Grant came in. This is where it started for him, and this is where it's going to end for us. So I'm going to say goodbye for today. Tomorrow I'll have that video on the Indian mounds. I think you'll be interested in that. And then we'll go down the road and see where it takes us. See you in the next video, YouTube.